Welcome back to the Jeremiah Show. My special guest today, Jim McAninch. He's a contemporary artist. He's based in Santa Barbara. He's got some amazing sculptures. We're talking about that right now. We came back in. We're listening to the great music was handpicked by Mr. McAninch. And we're listening to Laurie Anderson, who I was not familiar with, and I love it. Oh, Superman. I like the song, Jim. It's fun.
Cool. Yeah. He just had a concert at the uh w geez, downtown LA. I'm blanking, showing my age. Orpheum uh last week, and it was just amazing. Uh and I think listening to that work in the 80s, I was at a it was at a place by the beach in Santa Barbara. It was a contemporary musician who had a studio. It was in one of those motels, but it was like this tower room up above the hotel, and we were sitting there looking out at the ocean in this odd structure, listening to that come on, the kind of repetitive beat and the odd story that's kind of a collage of uh, things about the male and definitely sort of a sense of threat, under the nuclear uh, window of possibility. But anyway, to move on, um,
Hey, we were going to
the
talk about texture, about your
yeah,
sculptures and your art and
I think
texture. You're giving us some texture right there with that music. I mean, that's a lot of texture.
right, yeah. Though I think my work may be a little more punk in the kind of roughness. I think in addition, or to continue on what I was saying about kind of like not liking the smooth, uh, predictable surfaces. Uh, I I'm interested in almost as if it, so the art, different types of art have, I would like to say, different superpowers. And sculpture is a little beleaguered in the present moment of 2024 because digital in a lot of educational environments has kind of taken the space as the thing that's not painting, uh, uh, digital work or performance art, which I like. Um, so I kind of, as a sculptor, I I think there are at least two superpowers. The one superpower is sculpture casts a shadow, and you could argue no other art form does that in the same way. And the other superpower is you can take a artwork that is a sculpture, drop it in the ocean for 1,000 years, and dig it up, or bring it up, and it you still have an artwork. Um, so it tends to survive these long times in ways that become then sort of messages from the past to our present. So my surfaces have a worn, gnarly, sharp edge. Um, and if you think about when you're pouring molten metal into a plaster vessel, there's an element of geology about it. Um, and a lot of the times the metal will move through cracks uh, that were introduced in the plaster and uh, take its own path. So that all of that is interesting, and all of that is reflected in how the works look.
It's interesting that you described your work as punk a little bit further back,
Uh-huh.
which made me think. And then the music that you sent The only complaint I have is that you sent me 10 songs and I can only play 7.
Oh,
So I couldn't play all of them. And now that I see, when I read the titles, I think, yes, there is some storytelling here. There's some texture. There's some context that
right.
you're adding, which adds to the story of your art and the story of who you are right now. So my question back to punk, when you described it as punk, if you had to describe your art, picking a couple music genres, what aside from punk, what would you choose? How would music speak? How does it speak and define your art? Because I think music is a big part of your life as well as an artist. It sounds like.
Yeah. Uh, that's uh, that's an on the spot question. um,
If I
I
could jump in,
would
what I
say
can
I
tell you
would
as a
kind of
viewer,
say an electric kind of a punk folk.
yeah,
Um, uh, uh, I I want the work to kind of have human stories in it,
hmm
uh, and um, and also um, that not to be entirely wrapped up in a kind of technological bubble. Uh, so
and
yeah,
I would
I
say as
think
an observer, I've
yeah,
seen your artwork at the gallery, Silo 118 in person. I've looked at the photos that you've sent me, and I've looked online at your website, which is just excellent. I encourage everybody to go check that out. I could say some of your work is orchestral, like it's got a lot of meaning. The way it flows, the way that in some areas the metal expands and
hmm
contrasts. I could almost feel it could be that as well. It could be all of those things if your art was music. Um, what do you
yeah.
think? How did you first discover this casting method?
Um, I I had worked in assemblage, which is basically taking found objects and putting them together. And then when I was in school, my thesis involved going to swap meets in San Diego. I was at UC San Diego, and I would take pictures of the way people had arrayed their objects in order to sell them at the what was that time the stadium for the Chargers in the parking lot. And I, I had this idea that it was sort of this interesting moment where somebody is letting go of something, and at that point, it was a lot of private sellers who were selling their things. But anyway, they were like, okay, I'm going to sell it, but it still had a meaning. So the way they arranged things was some bit of self-portraiture um, with an eye toward uh, a cash transaction, which kind of was a funny sort of send up of what the idea of art and sales is. So I kind of I took a bunch of photographs and then built sculptures that were inspired by or sometimes direct copies of what I bought the things and made them my art. So anyway, after doing all that, I got tired of things breaking. And also people were asking me if I did like I had a bullhorn that was on top of a fan, and it said Sears or Sears. And people would ask, well, did you make that? And I said, no, I chose it. However, I could make it. I could cast it in bronze. And kind of out of that brag, I had an opportunity to start uh, working with casting. And the thing I loved about it was there's a community. You can't do it by yourself. And I think that's one of the things as an artist I value maybe more than anything else is dialogue. Um, my teachers would often say that art is a conversation, if it's just you talking to yourself, it's probably boring as hell. Um, but if it's you talking to your friends and other people overhearing and maybe joining in, that's where the magic is. So that's what I value in art, and when it seems to be a monotone or a just one person talking, including myself, I start to get bored.
Mhm. Hmm. Good point. I like that. Makes a lot of sense. We've got to take a break, Jim. I wanted to bring up, based off of that story at the swap meet, on how
Yeah,
people had arranged their furniture. Thought that's a perfect segue into talking about your art piece, bronze based on ubiquitous stackable plastic chair,
yeah,
child size. Can you
right.
tell us about that? I've got about 1 minute till we got to take a break.
Sure, absolutely. So this is a bronze version of that ubiquitous chair, and you and I discussed this. It's kind of a revenge piece in the sense that this is the chair that is eternally laying on your back patio with one leg broken, and maybe your uncle or your girlfriend was sitting in it and they fell over. But this is the one chair that will not break, and I think the so I'm kind of fixing the chair and at the same time making something completely useless in the sense that you're not going to stack it and you're not going to be able to carry it around to have social functions.
It's great. So I'm going to give you the website, Jim McAnich's website. It's McAninch arts.com. You can also follow him on Instagram. You got a pretty nice Instagram page there, Jim. Jim on
Thanks, man.
Instagram at Instagram.com. You can go to Jim underscore mechanic, like a mechanic on this one. And then check out the Elevate Gallery showing of Jim's work at La Cumbre Plaza, LCCCASB.com/Elevate Gallery. You can check out on I believe that's where I found on your website. You can check out the chair we just talked about, the piece of art called Bronze, based on ubiquitous stackable plastic chair, child size. And we will be right back. Don't go anywhere. Our special guest today, Jim McAninch.